1997. On a factory floor in Louisville, Kentucky, a Ford Aeromax L9000 rolled off the assembly line for the last time. No farewell video, no marketing campaign, just a quiet hum of hydraulics, a signature on a clipboard, and then silence. But in 1998, Ford, the name that helped build America's highway system, the symbol of working-class grit and muscle, was walking away from the heavyweight truck game. But how does that even happen? How does a company that once led the convoys across America's plains just step aside? Was it bad business, market pressure, or something more fundamental? Something woven into the very DNA of how Ford saw its future? This isn't just a story about horsepower and payloads, it's a story about evolution, about a machine that once ruled the roads and the corporate choices that pulled it off them. Because long before Ford bowed out of the Class 8 market, it was a force, a real one. A truck maker that didn't just compete with the likes of Mack and Kenworth, it dared to outdo them, with bold engineering, wild design choices, and a belief that its trucks could be as unstoppable as its cars once were. But to understand how it all unraveled, how the brand that helped build the backbone of the nation decided to shift gears, we need to rewind. Back to dirt roads, back to wartime factories, back to a different kind of Ford. And that's where this road begins. In the middle of the Great Depression, when most Americans were just trying to keep the lights on, Ford saw something most others missed: opportunity. Roads were unreliable, towns were isolated, and most trucks, they were little more than souped-up pickups with wooden beds and rattling engines. But Henry Ford wasn't just trying to build vehicles, he was trying to build an infrastructure. And in that forgotten era of economic dust and desperation, something new was about to roll onto America's roads. In 1934, Ford took the chassis of its trusty Model AA and began reimagining what a real workhorse should look like. They thickened the frame, beefed up the axles, dropped in the revolutionary flathead 5.8, a game-changer for torque and reliability. The result? Trucks that could handle real loads, not just hay bales and hope. They weren't flashy, they weren't comfortable, but they ran, and they kept running. And for working-class Americans, farmers, factory men, mechanics, that was everything. But Ford wasn't done. The Great Depression was just the warm-up. By the 1940s, World War II had turned Detroit into the arsenal of democracy. Ford's factories were transformed into military powerhouses, cranking out jeeps, tank engines, and trucks for the front lines. And with every contract, every blueprint, Ford learned something: how to scale strength. After the war, Ford didn't step off the gas. It shifted into overdrive. In 1947, the first true F-Series trucks rolled off the line. The F5 and F6 were built for payloads up to 10,000 pounds. No longer just farm trucks, they were tools for industry, built to haul timber, bricks, and America's post-war boom on their backs. And for the first time, comfort crept into the cab. Heaters for cold starts, softer suspensions, gauges you could actually read, even padded seats. Drivers weren't just operating a truck, they were living in it. Ford had moved from building machines to building lifelines. And by the early 1950s, one thing was clear: they weren't just in the truck game anymore. They were about to redefine it. In post-war America, highways stretched wider, cities grew taller, and the loads got heavier. Ford had two options: step aside or build something that could carry the future. They chose the second. But how do you convince the world that you, the pickup truck king, can compete with the giants of heavy hauling? Answer: you don't whisper, you roar. That roar arrived in 1951, and it had a name: the Ford Big Job. These weren't your dad's delivery trucks. They were steel titans, designed to haul steel, machinery, timber, concrete, anything that kept America growing. At the heart of the Big Job lineup was the 501 cubic inch inline six, an 8.2-liter monster tuned for torque, built to pull uphill, fully loaded, and never flinch. But if that wasn't enough, Ford reached into its war chest and unleashed the GAAV-8, the same engine that had powered Sherman tanks in World War II. This wasn't just marketing, it was muscle memory from the battlefield, now fueling construction, industry, and logistics at home. Truckers noticed, fleet owners noticed, so did the competition. Suddenly, Ford was rubbing shoulders with the big dogs, Mack, White, Kenworth, and not just surviving, winning. Because the Big Job wasn't just a model line, it was a statement. We're here, we're not backing down, and we're building for the long haul. But if the big job kicked the door open, what came next would redesign the entire room. A truck so advanced it didn't just change Ford, it changed expectations. By the late 1960s, the heavy-duty truck game was crowded. The kings were comfortable. The rules were known. But Ford wasn't interested in playing by the rules anymore. What happens when a company used to building pickups decides to reinvent the long-haul machine from the ground up? In 1967, the answer arrived with the launch of the Ford L-Series, a truck that didn't look like anything else on the road. Its cab? Sleek, with curved edges and a tilted windshield. Before aerodynamics was even a buzzword, Ford was shaping steel to slip through the air. And under the hood? You had options. Ford's own gasoline V8s. Or, if diesel was your game, Cummins and Caterpillar blocks up to 375 horsepower. These weren't just capable, they were flexible. Truckers could spec the L-Series to match their job, their route, and their driving style. From 4x2s to 6x4s, single axle or tandem, flatbed or sleeper, this was customization before configurators were even a thing. Ford leaned into durability. Reinforced frames, rust-fighting coatings, better cab insulation. Even wiring harnesses were redesigned for easier serviceability. Everything screamed, "This truck is built to outlive you." The industry took note. Fleet buyers liked the reliability, drivers loved the ride, and Ford, they saw the numbers go up. By the mid-70s, the L-Series had become a silent powerhouse in the Class 8 market. It didn't always shout, but it never broke down. And while the other guys were busy bragging, Ford was building. Still, inside Dearborn, there was a whisper. What if we built not just a workhorse, but a flagship? Something that turns heads on the lot and in the way station. That whisper became a roar in 1976, because what came next wasn't just a new truck. It was a Flex, a chrome-trimmed, tunnel-hooded beast that told the world, Ford doesn't just play in this space, we own part of it now. In 1976, Ford stopped being the underdog. They released something loud, big, bold, a truck built not just to haul, but to impress. And it had a hood so long it practically needed its own ZIP code. This was the LTL 9000. At first glance, it looked unlike anything Ford had made before. That tunnel hood design wasn't just for style, it had a function. It hid dual vertical exhaust stacks and routed airflow more cleanly over the cab, slicing through wind instead of crashing into it. Aerodynamics, baby, long before it became the buzzword of the 2000s. Underneath that sculpted metal? Power. Lots of it. Fleet buyers could spec Cummins NTC engines pumping out between 300 and 450 horsepower. Torque numbers nudged well past 1,100 pound-feet. Inside, Ford had done something unheard of. They made the cab luxurious. Quilted insulation wrapped the cabin. Carpet lined the floor. The dash was trimmed in optional wood grain. And if you spec'd the sleeper, you could get a mini desk, extra storage, and enough headroom to stretch without hitting steel. This wasn't just about trucking anymore. It was about pride, identity, showing up at a job site and knowing you had the best rig in the lot. Fleet owners loved the math. That sleek design meant better aerodynamics and up to 10% better fuel economy over traditional boxy rivals. Drivers? They loved the ride, the quiet, the comfort. The LTL 9000 became a statement. It wasn't for everyone. It wasn't cheap. But if you were serious about the road, if trucking was your life, this was your throne. But here's the thing, when you hit the top, where do you go next? What do you do when your truck already looks like a tank, drives like a Cadillac, and sips diesel like it's on a diet? Ford had an idea, go further. Because the next truck? It looked like it was from the future. Curves, lights, standing room sleepers, a cab that felt more like a spaceship than a semi. By the early 1990s, Ford's Class 8 trucks were still respected, still selling, still showing up on job sites and interstates across the country. But under the surface, pressure was building. The EPA was tightening its grip. New emission standards required cleaner engines, fast. Safety regulations were evolving too, demanding better crumple zones, visibility, and braking systems. And fuel economy? It was becoming a non-negotiable priority for fleet owners. Meeting all those demands meant one thing: major investment. But Ford's priorities had shifted. Instead of doubling down on their big rigs, they were pouring money into the parts of the business that brought in massive returns. F-Series pickups, SUVs, and high-volume sedans like the Taurus. Big trucks? They weren't flashy. They didn't win awards, they didn't sell in the millions, so they got less budget, less R&D, less attention from the top. Meanwhile, the competition wasn't slowing down, and the market noticed. Fleet buyers wanted advanced telematics. Ford didn't have them. Drivers asked for more comfort and more tech. Ford delivered late or not at all. Then came the final blow. On a gray day in 1997, Ford officially sold its entire Class 8 truck division to Freightliner. The deal included the factories, the tools, the designs, and with it, the rights to trucks like the Aeromax and LTL 9000. The final units rolled off the Louisville line quietly. No press release, no farewell event. Just a few workers in coveralls, watching the last of a legacy roll past. But while it seemed like the end of Ford's heavy-duty dreams in America, something unexpected was happening overseas. Ford left the highways, but never the story. Its trucks built the roads and the memories. And maybe, just maybe, they'll return. Until then, the legend rolls on. Subscribe for more stories of machines that shaped America.